introduce you to an opportunity to meet a qualified intermediary. A QI, as we also known as an accommodator, is a requirement for the 1031 exchange. There are many qualified intermediaries out there, but we're very selective on who we choose to do business with, mainly because we want to make sure our clients, you, our members, are taken care of, but also your clients understand what they're doing. Now, they don't, frankly, in this industry, I don't know if I should say this, they don't make as much money as you do. They don't. In fact, they make a very fraction of what you do, a very small fraction of what you do. But they're still willing to put the time and effort to educate. And that's what drew me to Logan and the Moody exchange. So let's give it up for Logan Lee.
Okay, awesome. Let me first say it's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Logan. I'm from San Diego, California. I like that, thank you. But I'm originally from Houston, Texas. So I've got the roots. So a lot of our clients are selling California and going to Texas, right? But I went the opposite direction. But anyway, it's such an honor to be here. Dan, thanks for having us. I just want to say, when I first met Dan, I kind of didn't believe what he was saying to me. I said, really, this guy's a real estate agent? This doesn't sound right. But the more I got to know Dan, he is very much genuine, as you know. And I don't know about you, but if I have a killer strategy and I'm making tons of money and I'm doing a lot of listings, I probably don't want to share that with everybody else. That's not his heart, that's not his team's heart. He wants to share this strategy so that more lives can be changed. He genuinely means that. I had a great conversation with him about that last night. And it's not about transactions, it's about relationships. And if you look at the biblical, spiritual side of it, it's covenantal. The way you look at clients on the planning side. So it's just such an honor to be here and just be a little cog in the wheel to help you through the 1031 exchange process. So it was 2005, it was around this time when I first got into commercial real estate, and I'll never forget it. I had a conversation with one of our investors, and just talking on the phone, talking to the investor, getting to know the investor. He was originally a Holland immigrant that came to the United States in the 50s and 60s. And I asked him, I said, wow, how did you accumulate your wealth? That's just amazing that you're able to invest in all these programs. And he said, and I assumed he would say something like, I'm a retired engineer from Boeing, or I have stock options, or I invested in Apple at the right time, or whatever the situation would be to gain wealth that you would typically think of. But he said something that astounded me, and I'll never forget it. He said, in 1972, I bought a duplex. That's all he said. And I said, okay, that sounds good. That was okay, duplex, wow. And then he goes on to explain, I bought a duplex. And then it appreciated in value, and I did a 1031 exchange, and I deferred capital gains taxes, depreciation recapture tax, net investment income tax, state income tax, and I invested my whole dollar, not 60 cents on the dollar if you were to pay taxes, but the whole dollar exchanged into a bigger deal, and then a bigger deal, and then a bigger deal. And then from that 2 duplex, he had over 1,000 multifamily units that he managed in Los Angeles County. That's an investor, and that's the type of people that you guys are going to get the privilege to work with. So the 1031 is a very powerful tool, and if you're not familiar with it, I'm just going to briefly just share a few things, some of the rules, and what I do, what my part to play in this is. But then, of course, afterwards, if you have any other questions, feel free to ask. A qualified intermediary is a QI. You're going to hear QI a lot. Another expression is accommodator, a 1031 accommodator. So I want to first say what makes it qualified. What makes a qualified intermediary? And the best way to describe that is what is not qualified. Your taxpayer cannot be his or her own qualified intermediary. That's an easy one, right? You can't have your family members be a qualified intermediary. You can't have an agent or your own attorney be a qualified intermediary. But besides that, if it's a purely independent third party, that individual or that company can act as a 1031 accommodator, okay? And what it really means is when you have a client that sells appreciated real estate, and we'll get into what qualifies briefly, when your client sells appreciation real estate, they cannot take constructive receipt. That's the word. You cannot take constructive receipt of the funds. It must be held by an independent party or a qualified intermediary or a 1031 accommodator, okay? So that's basically it. Strangely, this is shocking, it's 2024. There's no regulation, there's no independent federal body that regulates QIs, which is just crazy and astounding to say that, but it's true. Now, I would recommend, in terms of qualified, to find someone that makes sure that it's held in a segregated FDIC-insured bank account, preferably its own individual custodial account per exchange. That's very important. We had a qualified intermediary a year or two ago that invested everything in crypto. The clients, they did an exchange, they used a qualified intermediary, they invested in Bitcoin. What do you think happened? They lost it. It blew their whole exchange, and they had to pay taxes. They lost their money and they had to pay taxes. So it was a nightmare. We've had other QIs lose over 85, one in Nevada lost over $85 million because they spent it on yachts and vacations for themselves. So I would recommend you really do some research and find someone local to you, and you can of course talk with me as well. We're nationwide, by the way. We're not just San Diego or Houston, although we do have offices in San Diego and Houston. We serve clients all over the country. But it's really important to know who you're dealing with, okay? The other side of the fence, you don't necessarily have to use some big title company, big exchange company. Although obviously it's on the safe side. They're very much safe. They have a big team. They're fidelity bonded and insured with E&O insurance. That's also very important. But sometimes you don't get the service if you're working with a huge qualified intermediary that has tens of billions of client assets that they're working with at any given time. Just saying, and there's nothing wrong with that, but if you're not getting the service with those large 1031 exchange accommodators, you might want to find someone local that you can, like I said earlier, have a relationship with and continue to bounce off with ideas and do some educational events with that local qualified intermediary. I think it's really important to find someone that you can have access to that could be a service and call it an extension of your team. Very important, and that's something that we do. Yes, ma'am, do you have a question? Yes. Yes, I think it's really important that you make sure, if you talk to your qualified intermediary that you work with, that they keep the client funds in a segregated bank account, not just commingled with other funds, and not just overnight. I would say you put it in a custodial account. Just to even if the bank fails, if it's in a custodial account, it'll be okay. It'll be safe from any bank failures. So be above reproach and definitely ask those questions. So that's qualified intermediary. Did I get everything there? I think I did. Your client cannot take possession of the funds. It's very, very important. It's got to go through a QI. Okay, we got into how to select one. I think you could just Google search in your local market and find one and ask these types of questions and make sure you find the right one, or you can call us. We could be one for you. Okay, this is helpful. This kind of goes a little bit into the process, and this is one of the things that drives me nuts. Sometimes I get calls, actually often I get calls, and an agent or a broker will say, hey man, we're doing a 1031, we're closing escrow tomorrow. Okay, wow, great, let's go. So this is a very helpful chart because it talks about the correct way to go and approach your 1031 investors. And I would also say, going back to what Dan said earlier, ask questions. When you're dealing with your book of business and your clients, ask, hey, is this an investment property? Was this help? Oh, let me go into that. I apologize. That was a very big thing to address. Your primary residence, you cannot do a 1031 exchange. Y'all know that, right? You cannot exchange your primary residence. I get questions every day about secondary homes. And so it's very much a gray area, but in general, you really can't exchange your secondary home if you don't have Schedule E rental income on that secondary home, okay? That's the general rule, but if you have questions on that, you can ask me, and we could talk later if it's a little bit fuzzy. For example, if someone has a property and they're letting it appreciate, they don't have Schedule E income on it, they're not renting it out, but they barely use it, it's an investment property. then we could probably work with that. But we would really want a CPA or an attorney to opine on it being an investment property. But aside that, beside your primary residence and your secondary home, that's your vacation home, everything else is like kind, and you can exchange, and it's investment real estate. That's real estate that you could do a 1031 on. So I wanted to address that real quick. Everything else is free game. If it's a property held for investment use, then you could do a 1031 exchange. In 1921, Section 1031 was established. This is not a new thing. And it was established in 1921 to invigorate and create more business in the local economies. And it's been that. It's been an injection of new investment into economies ever since 1921. So Section 1031, that's the basis as to why Congress established it, why it's written in the IRS tax code. So this chart's really helpful. Again, ask your clients questions. Hey, this is a single family rental property. Are you gonna do a 1031 exchange? Ask them early and get us involved early in the process. That's the cleanest way to do it. That's the best way to do it. And it'll give you time to make sure and shop around for the best qualified intermediary. When I call on, so what I do is I call on a lot of listings, commercial and residential listings, and you'll be shocked. 95% of the time I ask the question on the listing broker, hey, do you know if your client's gonna do a 1031? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know. And I'm just stunned by that. But do you understand like what an amazing tool that could be? And they're just, as you know, zeroed in on the transaction. They don't care beyond the transaction. So, and I know that's not you. So be sure on the early side to ask questions from your clients. Are you going to do a 1031 with this? Let's go. Let's connect with a qualified intermediary. The second thing I'd recommend is when you're out prospecting, when you're out educating, when you're out, integrating your practice into your local economy, bring a QI with you. I think it's we do educational events all the time, and we'd be happy to do that for you guys in your local markets as well. Well, safe harbors, usually you need to have it for about 2 years, right? So if you're saying 6 months, then generally that doesn't fit the scope of what we're looking for. But it's all about the taxpayer's intent. If the taxpayer wants this to be an investment property, they buy it, they renovate it, and then they sell it, I would really want to see over a year at least, not 6 months, but 2 years is ideal for safe harbor. So there's a simple forward exchange. That's when you sell your property and then you sell your relinquished and you invest in a replacement. You have 45 days to select your next property or properties. What's not as common is a reverse exchange. I'm actually doing 3 reverse exchanges right now where usually the client will have cash, they'll like a particular deal, they'll close one deal first, and then they'll sell the relinquished properties within a 180-day period to replace that equity in a reverse exchange. So I'm actually out of time, but we're here all day, so happy to answer any questions. But thank y'all. We'd love to work with you.